Hello friends. Welcome to Defense and Technology. On this channel you will get fully information about defense and technology. Let's view the video. The shocking origins of the U.S. Army, June 14, 1775. A nation without an army, the chaos before 1775. In the early 1700s, the American colonies were a collection of scattered settlements under British rule, divided, decentralized, and dangerously vulnerable. Each colony maintained its own small militia, but these forces were poorly trained, loosely organized, and often unprepared for real warfare. When conflict erupted, like during the French and Indian War, militias relied heavily on Britain's redcoats to do the heavy lifting. This dependency created a strategic gap. If war broke out without British support, the colonies were nearly defenseless. The militias weren't standing armies, they were part-time volunteers. Farmers by day, soldiers only when necessary. Loyalty to the British Crown complicated matters. Many colonial leaders were unsure whether to even consider a national military. Then came the spark. In April 1775, the battles of Lexington and Concord exploded tensions between British troops and American patriots. Shots were fired. Blood was spilled. And just like that, war was no longer a theory, it was happening. The colonies suddenly realized they were at war with the greatest military on earth, and they had no central army to resist it. Fear, urgency, and chaos spread like wildfire. Could 13 colonies, divided by geography, culture, and economy, unite quickly enough to form a fighting force? Or would their lack of preparation doom the revolution before it even began? Out of this confusion and desperation came a historic decision, one that would change the future of global military power. June 14, 1775, a day that didn't just give birth to an army, it gave birth to American military identity. Birth of a fighting force, the Continental Army is formed. In the hot summer of 1775, the Second Continental Congress convened in Philadelphia. Debates raged. Could the colonies unite under a single command? Could civilians transform into soldiers? Could an army be built from scratch while a war had already begun? The answer came swiftly. On June 14, 1775, Congress authorized the creation of the Continental Army. With that single act, 13 fractured colonies became a unified resistance. Their first act? Choosing a leader. George Washington, renowned for his courage, discipline, and presence, was appointed commander-in-chief. Tall, calm, and battle-tested, he wasn't just a symbolic figure. He was the backbone of a force that had to learn to crawl before it could run. But this new army was anything but ready. Lacking uniforms, formal training, and weapons, the Continental Army was a patchwork of militiamen, some with muskets, others with pitchforks. They had passion, but little coordination. Washington faced a nightmare scenario: organize thousands of volunteers, instill discipline, and go toe-to-toe with professional British soldiers. Supplies were scarce. Ammunition was limited. Many soldiers had never seen war, and desertion rates were high. But Washington introduced structure. He brought in drills. He emphasized strategy. He installed a chain of command. Most importantly, he planted the seeds of belief. This wasn't just about war, it was about identity. Fighting for independence meant building more than a government, it meant constructing a military foundation from the ground up. The Continental Army was not yet the powerful force we know today, but it was alive, and its heart was beating. This was the start of something massive, a transformation from rebellion into revolution. Guerrilla warfare and innovation, America's tactical edge. The British military was a terrifying force, disciplined, well-equipped, and globally feared. Their red uniforms, marching formations, and volley fire tactics were the definition of military precision. But in the forests, hills, and swamps of colonial America, those tactics met an unexpected and unorthodox resistance. The newly formed Continental Army lacked numbers, resources, and training. But what they lacked in power, they made up for in creativity. Instead of traditional European warfare, American fighters embraced guerrilla tactics, ambushes, sabotage, hit-and-run strikes, and surprise assaults from behind cover. Inspired by Native American combat styles and hardened by frontier survival, American soldiers used the land as a weapon. At places like Bunker Hill, Concord, and Trenton, American forces proved they didn't need to win every battle. They just needed to outlast, disrupt, and surprise. Washington understood this. He didn't fight to dominate, he fought to endure. He avoided large-scale losses and kept morale alive. Retreat was not failure, it was strategy. One of the Army's greatest innovations came in the form of intelligence gathering. Washington's use of spies, coded letters, and invisible ink created one of the earliest organized espionage networks in American history, the Culper Ring. This group provided critical British troop movements and sabotage opportunities, often turning the tide of small but important battles. Weapon manufacturing also saw innovation. Local gunsmiths modified muskets, created better bayonets, and began casting homemade artillery. The U.S. didn't have grand armories, but it had brains and passion. Even disease was weaponized. Smallpox ran rampant, but Washington, in a radical and controversial move, ordered mass inoculation of troops decades before vaccines were common. It saved countless lives and kept the Army alive when bullets couldn't. Guerrilla warfare, spy networks, battlefield medicine, local industry. These weren't just tactics, they were survival. The British had their empire. America had innovation. And that became its greatest weapon. Forged in fire, the trials of the Revolutionary War. The birth of the U.S. Army was more than paperwork and orders. It was pain, sacrifice, and sheer survival against impossible odds. Nowhere was this more evident than in the winter of 1777 at Valley Forge. With frozen feet, no shoes, and rotting clothes, soldiers died from exposure, disease, and starvation. But they didn't abandon their posts. They endured. This moment, bleak as it was, became the crucible in which a real army was forged. Enter Baron Friedrich von Steuben, a former Prussian officer with a sharp tongue and unmatched military knowledge. He drilled the men relentlessly, introduced new battle formations, and instilled discipline that transformed ragtag militias into a coordinated army. Under his guidance, soldiers learned how to reload under pressure, march in formation, and respond to complex commands. It was here that the American army began to look like an army. But the transformation wasn't just about drills. Soldiers began to bond as brothers. Morale was rebuilt through shared suffering. The army wasn't fighting for pay, they were fighting for freedom, dignity, and the future of their families. Each battle afterward tested this resolve. From Monmouth to Saratoga, the army held ground, outwitted superior forces, and earned global respect. News of American resilience reached Europe, drawing support from France, Spain, and other rivals of Britain. The Continental Army was no longer a fledgling group, it was becoming a symbol of resistance worldwide. Washington's leadership remained the glue. He was everywhere, riding into battle, calming mutinies, and standing shoulder to shoulder with freezing troops. He refused to take pay, asking only for the survival of the cause. Even when defeats came, like at New York or Charleston, the army never crumbled. Each loss taught new lessons. Each retreat protected the core of the movement. As the war dragged into years, one fact became clear: the British could no longer easily suppress the rebellion. The American army, born in urgency, had evolved into a legitimate threat. The fighting force created on June 14, 1775, was no longer a dream. It was a reality forged in fire, tougher, smarter, and more determined than anyone had imagined. Legacy begins, June 14, and the rise of U.S. military power. What began as a desperate call for unity became the foundation of a military that would grow into one of the most powerful forces in human history. June 14, 1775 is not just a date, it's a declaration. A moment when freedom took a stand. A moment when farmers became fighters, and volunteers became veterans. That day marked the beginning of the United States Army, an institution that has since fought in every major global conflict, evolved with every generation, and stood as the front line of American strength and values. From its humble beginnings to becoming a technological and strategic superpower, the Army's origin story is a testament to courage, innovation, and relentless willpower. And it all began with a decision made in a small room in Philadelphia. Thanks for watching. Subscribe our channel Defense and Technology for more interesting and knowledgeful videos.